So let's get started. Our first presenter is Jenny Valdés Del Valle, and she is give it up, she's the program officer for the Evanston, I'm going to refer to it as ECF from now on, okay? Is that fine? So that's where she's at. She lives in Pilsen. We were talking about Pilsen, where my dad grew up. And she's been with the organization for a while. You're also the liaison to the Latinx community here in Evanston. 2019, she served as a translator and interpreter for undocumented communities at Rosalind Franklin University Clinics. She also collaborated with Monteverde Institute, carrying out research on child malnutrition in Costa Rica. And Jenny says she's committed to bringing multicultural, multifaceted scope to ECF's work. She speaks Spanish, English, and French. Favorite hobbies, she's a plant mom, and going to as many concerts as possible. What was the last concert? What was the last concert you went to? All right, Mana's a big group. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jenny Valdés Del Valle.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to set my timer because I want to be mindful of our time together. And before my time starts ticking, I would like for all of you guys to join me in a deep breath. Thank you very much. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. Let's start here. All right. So this book that I want to share to you guys about, this is a book about compassion. This is a book about trauma. And it's a book about understanding our feelings and our brain in relation to trauma. This book is called What Happened to You? And the title immediately got my attention because it changes the narrative as opposed to asking what is wrong with you when we're dealing with mental health. And it's not inherently assuming that people are damaged or broken. Asking what happened to you really tries to understand that trauma is really just an event, an adverse event that took place in your life. And the effects of that traumatic event lingers in your body. Your brain is just trying to cope with whatever situation you experience, and it's just your body reacting as the event lingers in your body. So we really are not damaged goods. We are just hurting. And this book was written by Oprah, who needs no introduction, in collaboration with this remarkable doctor, Dr. Bruce Perry. He is a psychiatrist, actually teaches at the Feinberg School of Medicine in Northwestern, and all of his research he does through a neurodevelopmental lens. So that's a pretty interesting research. In the interest of clear language, this book was it, let me tell you. But later, a little bit more on that later. To understand what happened to you, Dr. Bruce Perry shares a very important perspective. He highlights that it's important to look at the early development of children. And he says, the times from 0 to 7 years old are the most critical to a child in every aspect, but particularly in emotional development. That is when all of our emotional scaffolding takes place. Our caregiver, by responding to our needs, is pretty much reinforcing that positive stimulus so that you know that your stressor, whether that's hunger or a diaper change, that's being attended to. And later in life, you will have that emotional scaffolding to handle stress and have regulation and a proper response. However, what happens if the caregiver does not respond appropriately or timely? Children become dysregulated. Let me share a scenario with you. Dr. Bruce Perry proposes child A and child B. Child A received all necessary emotional scaffolding from 0 to 7 years old, all affirmations, all affection. But later in life, they experience a very different events, traumatic events. Child B, however, did not receive any emotional scaffolding from 0 to 7 years. But later in life, didn't really face any major traumatic events. Their life was pretty much fairly predictable. Who do you think had better chances at thriving and better deal with stressors and relate themselves to others in a more successful way? Child A, because of the scaffolding, how important it is to have that emotional development at an early age. One of the most impactful anecdotes that Dr. Perry shares is about his work with Child X. Child X grew up in a very difficult environment with a father struggling with alcoholism. He was physically punished and eventually had to be removed from his family and moved into the foster care system. And at school, this child was doing okay with everything except for this one professor, who he was very aggressive to. And Dr. Perry did everything in his research to make sure what exactly is it triggering to this child. And as he was talking to the dad, he noticed two things. He smelled like alcohol, but he also smelled like Old Spice deodorant. So he went to the teacher and said, "You just gotta tell me what your deodorant is." And he said, "Old Spice." That is how transcendent those early experiences are, to the point that Child X related Old Spice scent with fight or flight. And that is why it's so important to ask what happened to you as opposed to what is wrong with you. Luckily, this emotional scaffolding can be developed later in life, and it can be built. Our brains are very malleable. But when I was reading this from Dr. Perry, I thought about my work with the Evanston community. How many people from the communities that we serve carry the burden of trauma in their shoulders, and we continue to serve them not being trauma-informed? Any person who works in any organization in Evanston that serves social justice needs to be aware that the lack of social justice is causing a mental toll in our community members. So how can we expect people to have any further emotional scaffolding built if you're food insecure, if you're experiencing homelessness, if you live in an abusive household, or you're mistreated because of your gender identity or your race identity, or if you constantly face gun threats at school? What emotional scaffolding can we provide? So a lot of our community is living in survival mode. And constantly living in fight or flight mode is in itself a form of trauma. Neglect, you might say, is another form of trauma as well. And it presents itself in very different ways. Food deserts are one form of neglect. Segregation is another form of neglect as well. Not having access to proper health care, you might argue, is another form of neglect. So for this precise reason, I wanted to share the emphasis on asking what is wrong, what happened to you as opposed to what is wrong with you. But the most important takeaway that I want to share with you all, Dr. Bruce Perry says that there's one key element to post-traumatic wisdom and healing. That is community and relationships. Relationships are a great vehicle for providing therapeutic experiences because humans are naturally social beings, and they need to feel that belonging, and they need to feel that they matter, especially children. Dr. Bruce Perry's research says that a child only really needs one person to count on, and that can be a caregiver, that can be a neighbor, that can be a teacher, an auntie. It doesn't matter as long as they're there for them. So as adults, relational wealth provides that healing, even if you find it in school, church, sports, friends. So while this whole book blew my mind, the main takeaway I want to share with you all is it all goes back to community. And it's not a cliche. It's scientifically proven right here. So I know that we all know it really does take a village. Let's just make sure it's a trauma-informed village. Thank you.